I'm George. Welcome to GMakes, and this is just a quick overview of right here my node setup for Nodevember days 1 and 2, which is Space Junkyard. I keep wanting to say Space Graveyard, and I initially kind of read it as Spaceship Junkyard, which is how I came up with this idea. Here this isn't a tutorial per se. This is just an overview. Actually, just so I can move things around in my viewport a little bit faster, I'm going to disable a couple things. First of which is going to be, you see this kind of outline, this big cube. I have a fog, where is it? Let me find the node for it. So it is, node texture. I have this somewhat organized, join geometry instance. Here we go, volume cube. So this is this big kind of outline you see here, which if I go to my rendered view, you can see is giving us that kind of haze. And if I even go fully into my camera, so when I turn this off, you can see, because I have this light here from this little like spaceship droid thingy, and I wanted to be able to see that light. I'm an Eevee, so I added a haze, and I just used a volume cube, no material or anything, just this cube. So if I cut that, you can see that haze, that visible light disappears because there's no haze, there's no volume, there's no fog to filter that light through. So another thing I'm going to do, which might slow my computer for just a little bit until it goes through, is in all these I have, where is it? Again, slight organization. It should be muted. There it is. I have this junk, so I'm just going to go out of rendered view. Again, this is all in one geo node. So I started with the default cube, added a geometry nodes, and then just added all of my nodes. I have all these little piles of like junk that are spread around, and I have them not, I'll go to materials so you can see. I have them, they're not realized instances because I have this, again, procedural textures as well. If I go to my junk cubes, is this the right one? No. It's just called junk, I think. Rock, space, windows, junk cubes, space gray. Is it junk cubes? It must be. Oh, yes, it is. You know, so many procedural things going on. Again, slight organization. Always stay organized. It will help you in the long run. I have this random object info node, random going into a color ramp with constant so that I get all these multiple colors going into my base color here. And because I want those random colors and I want to specifically be able to use that random object info, that this output right here, I don't have to make a whole like using the attribute. I don't want to do that. So that's why I haven't realized instances, because you'll see this might slow down my computer, but once I unmute this by pressing M, it will slow down my computer as it realizes all these instances. It should speed up as I kind of walk through this. And also I use this for some preview renders because it helps render it faster. But yeah, so that's already a lot better. But as you can see now, they're all just black and white because it loses that individual, that object randomness. So I'd have to use like attribute and then like capture attribute and all that stuff, which you can do. And actually, I think in one of my older tutorials, my Christmas tree one, I have that, a method of doing that. And also I think I have one like object random colors. I think I have a tutorial just on that, like how to make random colors in your random objects using geometry nodes, I believe, something like that. But I didn't want to have to go through all that just for this quick thing. But you can see now better with the material what I have kind of going here. So starting off, I have these kind of Star Destroyer from Star Wars inspired spaceships, almost like skyscrapers even, which are actually just a cone. So I didn't hard surface model anything. And that's also here, like cone ship is what I've called it. So you can see I start with a cone, and then that I transform it and get it to where I want. I extrude the mesh a whole bunch. I set my materials, and I subdivide the surface so that it's not just hard, and then I get a little more of that roundedness. And then I also deleted some of that geometry, and so that's for, you can see after I extrude this mesh, then I use that and some like the sides of it to extrude to get these little window bits. And I also, you see, I subdivide it and I split the edges to separate them. And then I scale them so you can see these individual lines. And then I also have like a cylinder down here. You can't actually see this, so this isn't actually necessary, but my initial idea was maybe to have some of these still have like their engines on. So that's why I have this cylinder and these icospheres down here that are instanced on some points to like be like the engines, and also why I like extruded back. So it's actually more detail than there needs to be, because my initial idea was to have these be a little more out and see a little more of them before I wound up doing like this graveyard, junkyard, dilapidated kind of thing. And then I took that, so that became an instance object after I transformed it a bit and rotated on this grid. So I started, I got rid of my original object input, which was the cube, just went to this grid, and then I distributed some points using a Poisson, or what I think, yeah, Poisson disk with a big distance, low density, and then that's just right here, and then I instanced these ships onto that and gave them random values for every single axis. So that way, theoretically, if I wanted to, you could then completely generate new scenes. So I basically just went through until I got, using these seed values, you can see I changed the seed down here until I got ones that I liked. And then I wanted the junkyard kind of piles. So I went and I did that, and that was right down here. You can see I have junk base, which are just the actual like cubes, where I start with an icosphere. I subdivided it, and then I triangulated it, and I did a little Boolean so that it's not all the same. Subdivided it again, and then I dual meshed it to get some of those more odd shapes, and then gave a noise texture and extruded it as one, so it got kind of wibbly wobbly. You could also use like a set position and then just fix the, like use a vector math to fix the position of it. But I just did extrude mesh because it's a little faster. I don't have to add that extra node in there. And then I use that as an instance object again on this grid, distributing points. Again, random values for this time the scale, and just one random value for the rotation on all on X, Y, and Z. And then I accidentally renamed this node junk, even though it shouldn't be. This is this is, what is this? This is, oh, this is another distribute thing. I don't actually know. Does that do anything? I don't know what's this doing here. Instance on points mesh. Oh, okay, yeah. So I have another. This is now gonna slow down my computer. I renamed this node by accident, but this is distributing on this junk pile some more. So I have all these junks on this instance on points, and then on all of those base junk piles, I distributed more points. You can see that just fixed it. And then I instance on those points. So this is just distribute points on faces, whatever it's called. And then I just instanced some more junk piles, and this was just a cube. But again, I triangulated and then dual mesh and then extruded, this time individually, so that we get some more crags and little craggly bits to make it look like trash. And then random values for both the rotation and the scale on those, just one for XYZ. And then I gave the material, the junk cubes one, again with that random objects, that random object info output. And then this drone geometry wasn't really needed because originally I had the piles behind it, but you couldn't really see them, so it didn't matter. And then I translated them to kind of get them more where I wanted. I just have to raise them up a bit. And then, again, that realized instances is on for now. And when I was doing preview renders, just to help speed up things a bit. But then for the final render, I turned it off because I wanted those random colors. So that's the base of the junk. And then I was like, I want a little bit like scaffolding, because I was looking at pictures of like junkyards, and often like when there's a bunch of cars or anything, there's also a bit of like scraggly metal that pops out. So I wanted these like cubes, which are kind of like scaffolding or like wireframe structure bits. So I just started with a cube, triangulated it again, just to get some more random points on it. And then I just turned that mesh to a curve, set the curve radius, and then used a curve circle, which I put down to 4. You could also use like a quadrilateral if you wanted. But I didn't know initially that's what I wanted, so that's why I started with a curve circle, and then I just put the number of points down to 4. And then trim curve, I think, gives it a nice, like, some of these look like they're broken almost. and that you don't realize in the final render that they're all just cubes. And then curve to mesh, and then again, just instance that on some distributed more points, instance it on points, and then changed it around with the, again, random values for the rotation and scale, and then move them up a little bit again and set the material to what I have here called wires. And then I also did some subdivide mesh and some extrude mesh for some little rocky bits. And this is actually just the grid right here to give it that kind of ground texture like dirt. So you can see if I turn off this material, this whole ground is going to turn white because it won't have a material. It's gonna, so many things are processing, my poor computer. There we go. So you can see that was just to give the little, instead of using like a displacement modifier, just did it here with in the geonodes, because I didn't want to use any modifiers, even though technically those are procedural until you apply them. But again, just to extrude mesh again for the whole thing. And then lastly, the last main thing is I have this little guy, which normally I would hard surface model, but I just did all in geonode, so it's all primitives, all pretty simple. This little like droid, and again, I don't have an HDRI, I just have some lights going on. A bunch of light spot planes, so I have my main light coming from above, and then I have two area lights coming from either side to light up this guy. And that's my lighting, and then I have a spotlight on him so that he can highlight those in the little trash he's looking at. But again, he's pretty simple. Again, he's just primitives that I joined together. So he's got this cylinder is the base start for it, and I changed the vertices to 6, and that's the one that's this rotating one around him. And then an icosphere in the middle, and then I use that. Actually, where's that icosphere? This is the other. This is the main one. Icosphere, and then I just joined that to get icosphere and cylinder. And then I also got a curve line down here with a resample, so that's not necessary. I wanted to make it a little craggly, but then it didn't really work. Set curve radius, spline parameter to give it a little more like an antenna, so it's not just a tube. Curve circle, curve to mesh, set material, yada yada yada, pretty standard stuff. And then lastly, I wanted these little glowing lights, especially I set it to spin, so I wanted that motion blur in the photo, in my final render rather. So I got some little icospheres, instance those on the point, so it'd be on every point of this cylinder that's now a hexagon. And then I set the material to the glow, and the actual material, again, procedural materials. So I have this glow red, which is actually just for the top of my little antenna, where he's like thinking about things. But if I go to my other glow red, again, label your materials and everything, especially when you're doing everything procedurally. It really helps. But yeah, speaking of materials, so you can see I have here, it's just an emission texture for these little lights. And again, I use that random object info. And then I just wanted a couple yellow, but a little more red. So pretty straightforward. And then for like the droid colors, you can see I have some, I want a little like dented and a little roughness. So just using bump nodes and noise and some procedural. So like here I have a noise texture, which then goes in the bump to get those divots, and I inverted it so the divots are like inside, not outside. And then color ramp, and then also for this like glowing one, I just wanted like a little bit kind of pixelated, or like it's not quite just a solid color in there. So I just used a brick texture, and then just changed the coordinates to find ones I like, and then just mess with the settings a whole bunch, and then threw in an emission texture as well. And I am an Eevee, so I put bloom and ambient occlusion on, screen space reflections, motion blur, changed this to end on frame, and gave myself a little more space so that I could get more motion blur. I didn't mess with lighting too much because, again, I'm not using an HDRI, and I'm not using a sun lamp. So, again, kind of just posting this to Twitter and stuff, so I wasn't too worried about super high quality or fidelity. And I just liked the way it looked, and I thought the light looked decent enough on the standard settings. I did change it to like high contrast, and I did a little bit of compositing, though I don't actually think maybe I didn't actually do that much compositing. But yeah, so that's pretty much the overview. And then I just animated that guy using a couple transform nodes to spin it real fast. So that way I could stop it for a still frame. And then join everything together. So nothing super complicated, just a lot of kind of fairly basic techniques to model. And it didn't take me too long. And not too intensive on my computer for rendering. Again, an Eevee using for a still image. And you could actually probably do this as an animation, though I'd probably do like the background and then animate just some of the light or the little guy by himself. Oh, and then the last thing I have is I just got lazy towards the end. So this is a separate object. It could have been another grid in my geo nodes if I really wanted it to, but I just got lazy at the end. So this is just an actual object that was added in another plane. But the texture is completely procedural. So this little space texture I actually really like. It's just a noise texture right here. So you can see, and then I turn the scale way up, and then I just use this color ramp to dial in those stars. And then it's an emission texture, and it's actually, this diffuse doesn't do anything. It's just the emission texture. So I can even get rid of that shader and nothing changes. Yeah, so it's not actually, nothing's like spawned. It's just all within the texture. And theoretically you could animate that, or you could, again, change this to like 4D. If you wanted to mess with like the, essentially like the vector or the seed of it. But yeah, so that is my fully procedural little scene for Nodevember days 1 and 2, Space Junkyard. And then my camera settings are pretty straightforward. I did do a depth of field because I wanted this little spaceship to be more in focus. You have to do it manually. You can't just select an object since this whole thing is one object. But yeah, and then I just changed the field of view way down to give myself a good depth of field, the aperture, the f-stop. And yeah, it was fun to do this. I think it turned out pretty well. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. And also, yes, I have a Twitter now. It's just George Makes. It'll also be linked in the description and at the end of the video if you want to. These are kind of my first posts on there, so if you want to follow along, I'll also be posting like updates or things I'm working on, hints at future tutorials, you know, anything like that on there, as well as the final renders and the overall node screenshots for Nodevember going forward. So hope you guys are making some cool stuff too. Go ahead, participate in Nodevember. Don't have to do every day, but it's cool to just see, and there's some fun prompts, especially if you want to get working with nodes. Nothing super complicated. You can just do something like this, where it's all pretty basic techniques, just all combined into one big scene. All right, well, hope you enjoyed this little overview. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Peace.